Hey guys, so before I start the video, I just want to say that I now have a new website called beyondthepowers.co.uk. It focuses on policing, human rights law and law in general. I post articles on there, I post videos on there, and if you want to support that in any way or the work on this channel where I do interviews and things like that, you can do so by making a one-off donation to PayPal or a more regular donation through also PayPal and Subscribestar and Patreon. And if you want to follow me on social media, the links to that are below as well. Basically, everything's in the description. So yeah, thank you for watching and thank you for checking out the website, and I hope you enjoy. So today we're going to be talking about Mason Greenwood. Now, like many people, I didn't know who Mason Greenwood was until he got accused of rape earlier this year. It's not the best way to be introduced to somebody's existence, but I don't follow football, so I just had no idea who he was. But I do like law, so this case has aroused my interest and I've been following it ever since. For those of you who don't know, he is a footballer. He's 20 years old, and until recently he was in a relationship with a woman called Harriet Robson. Earlier this year, an audio recording appeared online in which he can allegedly be heard trying to rape her. She also posted some pictures in which she appears bloodied and bruised, and she claims that Greenwood caused those injuries and that he used to domestically abuse her whilst they were together. As a consequence of this, he was arrested for rape. He was also then further arrested for a Section 47 assault, which is an aggravated assault and is an offensive assault occasioning actual bodily harm. He was then arrested also for threats to kill. So to get straight to the point and be quite blunt, which people won't like, if the CPS and the police had enough evidence to charge him by now, they probably would have done it. The fact that they have left him so long on bail and just kept renewing it and renewing it and renewing it suggests that, at least for now, they don't have evidence that is strong enough. And I know that the general public believe that he's definitely guilty, but the truth is, from a legal perspective, the evidence isn't quite as strong as the general public believe it to be. It's just not. The evidence that we have access to, I'm going to be honest, is not enough to get somebody convicted. Bear in mind, I'm saying the evidence we have access to. I suspect the police have access to more information, which is why he was further arrested for Section 47s and threats to kill. Now, when somebody's accused of a criminal offence in England, there's a threshold that must be met to convict them, and this applies whether you're arrested for something really serious such as rape or murder, or something lower level such as low level criminal damage like breaking a phone, or maybe a lower level assault like having a verbal altercation in the street. And that threshold is beyond reasonable doubt. So the court or the jury must be convinced that the defendant has committed the offence is beyond reasonable doubt. If there's reasonable doubt cast on the offence, then the defendant must be acquitted. Now, when the police and CPS look at the cases and whether they can charge them, they must consider many things. And they don't just get to do it based off feelings, they must follow procedure and they must apply a test. Now, there's two tests that they use. One of the tests is called the full code test and the other test is called the threshold test, but they more commonly use the full code test, so that's the one I'm going to explain. Now, for the full code test, there's two limbs that they must apply. The first limb is whether there's a realistic prospect of conviction, so they'll be looking at whether the evidence they have against Greenwood is more than likely going to result in him being convicted of the offence, and then secondly, whether it's in the public interest. Usually that threshold is quite easy to meet. It's a high profile case, it's quite serious offences that he's been accused of, but the problem is if you can't pass the first limb of evidence, then you can't go on to the second limb. When they're considering the strength of the evidence, they've got to consider any defences that the defence team may raise, because obviously they could use these to cast reasonable doubt, and like I say, if you can cast reasonable doubt, the defendant is going to be acquitted of the offence. So for instance, to apply that to this case, we see images of Robson bloodied and bruised. People are like, okay, why would she lie about that? He obviously did it. Arrest him, arrest him, arrest him, convict him. But this is the way that the lawyers are going to see this. So they'll say, okay, there's a picture of her bloodied and bruised. Other than her word, is there any definitive evidence that Greenwood actually did this? Or they could even go one step further and say, well, she says these are injuries, but how do we know these injuries aren't just makeup designed to look like injuries? Now, obviously, the audio is far more damning and really doesn't look good. But again, another excuse they could come up with is they could say, defence, that's the lawyerly word, a defence, I meant to say defence. Another defence they could come up with is, well, how do you know this isn't role play? Or how do you know this isn't edited? I mean, we've all seen deepfakes, they're amazingly good. And if they go to court and say, well, can you prove it wasn't role play? Can you prove it wasn't edited together maliciously? And the jury are like, oh, yeah, the prosecution can't prove that it wasn't acquittal. And they've only really got one shot at doing this because of the doctrine of double jeopardy. I've noticed a lot of people seem to think this doesn't apply anymore since the case of Stephen Lawrence, but it's not true. We still have this doctrine. It's just that it was reformed following that incident. So now it's the case that you can't try somebody for an offence more than once unless new evidence comes to light, and even then you can't just keep trying them and trying them and trying them. It's completely against the rule of law. There has to be some kind of end in sight. But don't take this as due diligence and a thirst for justice on the part of GMP and the CPS, because look, they've both got terrible track records when it comes to dealing with sexual abuse victims. Greater Manchester Police in particular have a terrible record. This force that is dealing with this only prosecutes 1.9% of rapes. 1.9. They frequently receive negative media attention as to how they handle these cases and treat victims. Take one case in question. A woman was told to just talk it out with her rapist and was actually pressured by the force to drop her case. She sued for £8,000 and she obviously won that case. Then there was another case just this May, so only recently, of a serving police officer who was convicted of rape and a Section 47 assault, so the same offences as what Greenwood is alleged to have committed. And then, perhaps the most unforgivably, there was the grooming gang scandal, in which underage girls were raped and trafficked by groups of men. The police and the CPS and social services all knew the extent and the severity of the offences and even the names and addresses of the offenders, but they covered it up. Ultimately, they don't care about Robson as a victim, they care about protecting their image, and if Greenwood actually is innocent, well, they'll pursue him ruthlessly anyway to protect themselves. I'm not saying that Greenwood will never be charged or never be convicted. I'm just saying that at the moment it doesn't look like they have enough evidence to do that. And I do think the CPS and police are going to be diligent on this case, but like I say, not because they're motivated by justice and what's right, but because they're scared of the backlash that they're going to receive from the public if they don't do it, and that is going to draw attention to their incompetence. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys. Like I say, there's an article below. Please do read the article. I think it'd be beneficial for people to read the article. And let me know what you think in the comments, because I'm particularly interested in what people think about this case, especially with it having a more international appeal, as most of the issues I talk about, well, all of the issues I talk about really localised to England. So yeah, I hope it was useful, and I will hopefully see you in the next video.